Today we're talking about the Tair 11. It's a 133mm f2.8 lens made in the ex-Soviet Union by KMZ from 1955 to 1995. KMZ standard for Krasnogorski Mechanical Plant. And yeah, basically this lens is interesting. It has something very special, which is its 20-blade diaphragm, which makes for a really round bokeh at any aperture. And then, yeah, the lens is really well built. It was built in its first iteration for M39 mounts, but not the Leica's red mount. It's not rangefinder coupled. It was meant for a reflex camera. So if you want to adapt it today to a Leica, it works, or a mirrorless camera. You need to add some rings to make it compatible to have the right flange distance. But it works great. This lens is machined aluminum, basically, and here's the focus ring. Quite a long focus throw, but works great. The aperture ring is the middle ring, as you can see here. And an extra nicety is this limiting ring to limit the minimal aperture. You can't go beyond what's set with this one. Some lenses at the time had that. So it's a nice touch on this lens. A well-built lens overall. So let's go see the results. It was a lens made for portraits, but we'll see it in every condition. This Tair 11 lens is interesting. The first two images shows you a good example of one of the main characteristics. So it's a very massive and very cumbersome lens. It's pretty big. But it's pretty easy to use once you get hold of the three rings, the one for the aperture, the one for the focus, and one to limit aperture value. It's pretty natural after a while using it. But the first thing we can see on the image on the right is this pincushion feeling, so this concavity of the geometric lines, horizontal or vertical, as you can see on the rooftop. That can be a problem for certain types of shots, but it can be easily corrected if you want to do post-processing, like on the picture on the left, that's actually the Museum of Photography, the Lycée in Lausanne in Switzerland. So the first thing we can see is beyond this geometric aberration. The bokeh is really nice, and the color rendering is very, very nice, very soft and creamy. And as we can see on those two next images, when you have scenes with less geometrical straight lines, you still have some on the left picture, but the rendering is going to be really interesting. The bokeh, as we can see on the foreground, on the left picture, is smooth, very creamy, as I was saying before. It's quite natural looking. And the lens is pretty resistant to high contrast textures, like the ones we can see on the water. Same thing on the right picture with the two swans. Good resistance to high contrast, and that combined to the soft and warm color rendering can be really interesting for your compositions. Increasingly, like on those two next pictures, as I was saying before, when you don't have straight lines. This lens was really known for portraiture, but it can be used for many situations, as you can see. Here on those two pictures, we can see that there's a really good rendering overall. It seems a little soft, but that's mainly due also to the halo effect in high contrast parts of the picture. Again, the bokeh is really nice with some cat's eye in the corner, but nothing really disturbing, and some hints of flare. This lens is really flare prone, and we can see the halo effect on the right picture over the leaves, which makes it more flat, but we can start to see that kind of flare and halo. We'll see more examples later. Here again, this lens is pretty slow with an f2.8 maximum aperture, but still is a great lens for its unique character. It's nice with modern sensors and IBIS, and even with for example, the picture on the left with very slow apertures where I want to get this dynamic motion artifact thing. It's a really cool lens. On the right, we have another example of this halo effect on the hairs of the barmaid, but yeah, this is really the character of this lens. It can be really interesting. It's soft, it's warm. Again, this bokeh is really fantastic, and yeah, that's a pretty good example of what those kinds of halos and flares can give. You can really have fun with it. It's going to be really sensitive to lateral incoming lights. So beware of low lights at the end of the day in certain situations outside. And as you can see on those two pictures, again, a great example of the kind of lens flare you'll get from a lateral out of scene light. But it really gives it its character, and you can really have fun with it. We'll see it a little bit later. Otherwise, it's this really creamy bokeh. Even scenes with high contrast are pretty well rendered, as we can see in the bar, in the restaurant image. It's a lens you're going to quite a specialized lens for a certain type of style. Here again, talking about the bokeh, the ghosting flare effect. I was visiting a photographer friend, Pem, in his studios, and while he was taking pictures of a model, I sort of had fun taking pictures, kind of a making of, and having fun with the flares. This lens is really fun to use because you slightly move on one side or another. The lateral incoming light is going to create some ghosting effects, some very interesting flares and halos, and these are two examples of that. So it's a very specialized tool in that sense. But beware again, it's going to be in some certain circumstances, you're going to really have difficulties not having any flare or ghosting or halo effect. So that's a limitation. But yeah, here let's zoom in a little bit on some of the previous pictures. It's not that crisp, even on the swans, as you can see. This part is in focus somewhere. It's not that crisp, but yeah, the texture rendering and the smoothness of the bokeh and the warmth of the colors makes it a nice lens for certain kind of works you will want to do. Same thing on the right. The focus is obviously on the infinite, on the clouds, but between this really soft rendering of the out of focus parts of the picture and the color rendering, it's really gives it a vintage look. And again, two more zoom in images. The one on the bar, you can see how natural and smooth the out of focus parts of the pictures are. That's interesting. That's per se very nice quality. You do have some kind of cat's eye effect, as we can see on the picture on the right, in the high contrast parts of the picture, but not at all disturbing. And the halo you will get on the high contrast parts of the textures is very, very nice indeed, in my opinion. Here I adapted it with its M39. So as you can see, I just screwed in some. That's the first version, the M39 version. Screwed in some extra extensor tubes. You can find them. You can find them secondhand. It's hard to find them firsthand, but you can find them in the ex-Soviet states. Usually, they're pretty cheap when you find them. And here I adapted it for M mount because that's what I use to test my lenses. But yeah, you can basically adapt it to anything you want, almost anything you want. So yeah, it's a great lens. The first version was M39, as I stated before. Then the versions that came after were M42. And the latest iteration, which you can still find, is supposed to have a slightly enhanced optical performance with greater definition and resolution at the center and periphery of the image. But this first version is quite searched for its nice character, quite soft bokeh, and But same optical construction, so it's very similar. You may want to try. If I find one, I might try it myself and do a review.